Carson, Leno, Fallon. Now, it's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today, about to have a conversation with Matthieu Bordes from Chateau Lagrange. Introduction in just a minute. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for podcasting. Hey, you got to have a listen to a couple of shows. One, I just released a conversation with my father before he passed. He passed 2 years ago. And we sat down, we got into the gritty, granular part of his career as an immigrant to America, how he became a pharmacist, and how he started as a merchant of wine. It became one of the most popular wine shops during the heyday of wine in California in the 70s and 80s. Have a listen to that. Also, May Eliane de Lanquesang. She was alive when the Nazis came into her parents' chateau in Chateau Pichon-Longueville and watched the Nazis destroy the chateau. It's an amazing story, like the easiest interview I ever did because I didn't have to ask any questions. She just told the story. And also just releases Michael Higgins, a photojournalist of wine. And our guest today will be excited to hear because he did a whole book on Bordeaux. It's an incredible sort of photo history of a region that you want to take when you go on vacation to Bordeaux, Argentina, and right now the Central Coast. And you can look at pictures, recipes, venues, and places to visit when you're there, but not while we're here today. Here to have a conversation with Matthieu Bordes. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thank you.
So what, you mentioned yesterday, where's your card? You were the king of everything. You do everything,
right?
No.
I'm the king of the team, but we have a strong team at Lagrange. I'm the head winemaker and general manager of the chateau, and I have started 17 years ago at the Chateau Lagrange. First, I was the assistant manager winemaker, and 10 years ago became the general manager winemaker. But I started first to learn. I grew up in Bordeaux. I was born in Bordeaux, grew up in Bordeaux. Started as an enologist. I did my enology studies at the end of between 96 and 98, long time ago. Then I went to engineering school. So I graduated engineering school, agriculture engineering school, and also the enology. So you have the part of the field and the part of the enology, which was extremely helpful to be able to manage from the pruning until almost the.
But what type of engineering? Mechanical engineering? Structural?
No, it was agriculture engineering school. Yes, specialized in a wine located in Bordeaux.
Wow.
The name was Enita Bordeaux Sciences Agro nowadays.
So it sounds like you wanted to be in this industry since you grew up in the industry, but I mean.
Yes, and I started a long time ago because my grandfather, when he retired, purchased some lands and he had some fruits, some vegetables, and also some vines. But we made vines just for friends. And to be honest, the wines were extremely helpful, but it was so funny. I remember when I was 5 years old, and every September we went with the family to the tiny vineyard. It was maybe one of the first garage wine. He had almost 10 barrels, and with white and red. So we did the press and we did the picking. It was extremely nice. So since I was maybe 5 years old, I have a strong and very good memory about that.
That's kind of interesting because there's that whole career path idea, right? I mean, and I don't think my listeners know that in France, or at least at some point in your life in France, maybe as an adolescent, when you take, the bac? You take your bac and you sort of decide what your career is going to be, and enology. But, there's a lot of folks that never went to enology school that make wine, that, learn the way you first learned from your grandfather in the cellar.
Yes, but it was just, it was not very scientist.
No, it was scientific.
It was the one where it's extremely tight and very acid, but it was nice. It was nice, and some of the friends enjoyed his wine. I have a very good memory.
Do you remember the taste, though? I mean, like if you saw...
Honestly, yes. Even if I was young, maybe he stopped making wine when I was 16 or 17.
Wow.
So I had the chance to taste many times this wine. I love the white, but the red was much more difficult.
And the grapes were all on property? This is a state bottling now.
Yes, it was a state bottling, exactly. And we had some Merlot, Cabernet, but also some very old grape variety that you are not allowed to plant anymore.
So you went to University of Bordeaux?
Yep.
For both?
For both. Yes, exactly. Enology school at Bordeaux with Professeur du Bourdieu, with Professor Ribeiro-Gaillon.
So this begs the question. We just talked about a little bit about the idea of, growing up in the industry and sort of being a cellar rat, and then, growing into the industry and learning by emulation or watching a famous winemaker. And here you took the academic path to do this.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask this yesterday, but I thought it would be too philosophical a question as we were tasting. For the listeners, we had a wonderful tasting yesterday, 20 so people, and we got a little history of Chateau Lagrange and tasted some amazing vintages, really. But the question is, what is the end game? We go to school, we get our engineering degree, we learn how to prune the vines, we learn to worry about climate change, we learn about pH and acid, phenolic ripeness, and all the things that go into making a bottle of wine. But what are we trying to do? Are we just trying to make the best thing we can produce?
Honestly, yes.
That's just it.
That's my goal, and that's the goal of my owner, who owns Chateau Lagrange for 40 years now. The first is always the quality. They always focus on the quality, not only about Lagrange, in mostly all the products that they used to produce. But at Lagrange, I have only one quest. It's please make the best one as you can, Matthew. That's always they told to me. And
that's so interesting.
Yes, and I'm used to say, as I told you yesterday, that I'm maybe one of the most lucky winemaker in Bordeaux, because when you are technician, as I am, studies all the technical parts and looking for quality, if your owner said, okay, we give you all the keys to you and you can manage the estate as you want, but the only quest is making the best one as you can, honestly,
it's a dream.
It's a dream. Yes, it's a dream.
So that's the question. What is the best quality of wine we can make from a vineyard? What does that mean?
So for me, and I think for Suntory as well, for the owner, the family group, is growing the best grapes on each plots or intra-plot selection that I have to take all the best from the terroir we have. And then when we have produced all the great grapes on each plots, we have 103 plots and 17 different type of soils. Finally, when you do the blend, you can pick all the best of the best and make the strongest selection, the tiny selection, to focus on the quality and to make the best wine, which is extremely representative of our terroir, of Saint-Julien, of Bordeaux, and of the vintage too. So Lagrange have never followed the trend. We have always thinking making the best wine, as me and my team and our enologist consultant expects.
I think that's a really important part of your opportunity as a winemaker. Like, you are lucky because profitability is important. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you get the chance to create an expression of time and an expression of place.
Exactly.
And how important is that, do you think, to the value of the Lagrange brand? I mean, Lagrange is on the street. You're traveling. We'll talk about your trip, which seemed extensive, but you're all over the world. You're tasting people. You're having dinners. You're in Tokyo. You're in New York. You're in Los Angeles, and you are trying to express some philosophical approach to Lagrange.
Exactly.
And that is, I want to make the best from our terroir that we can.
Yes, and I want to share it and to explain all of my consumers, my clients, and my future consumers, what is the goal and what type of experience you can have when you drink a bottle of Lagrange. You can be sure that you won't have something over-oaked, something over-extracted, something. It's always a question of harmony and balance, and the goal is to give some emotion and pleasure to all of the guests.
You mentioned terroir, and it's you brought a Burgundy yesterday a little bit, and of course, that's Pinot Noir is this amazing conduit to terroir. Of the 5 grapes of Bordeaux, maybe more coming up, right? But
yeah, we are allowed to plant 6 grapes in Saint-Julien.
What's the 5th? What's the 6th?
You have Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and Carmenère.
Oh, Carmenère. Well,
yes.
That's,
which is not very good. Honestly, I have 1 row of Carmenère.
Why it ended up in Chile?
Yes.
Why did it end up in Chile?
In Chile, I think they could ripe, but in Bordeaux, they never ripe. So even we had the 3 warmest vintage ever over the last 5 years. My row of Carmenère is extremely acid, green, some vegetal notes, not interested at all. So maybe for the next 70 years, if the global warming increase,
maybe it'll help.
But yet it's not ready. It's not ready.
Well, but I always read, or at least contended, that at some point there was always Carmenère in Bordeaux. It looked like and felt like Merlot, so they didn't really understand it until the DNA testing. And this is all, who knows if that's accurate or not. But of the other 5 grapes, you have 17 different types of soil.
Yes. When I arrived at the chateau 17 years ago, the first thing I did is to dig 200 holes into the 103 plots to have an idea about the soil and the subsoil, because, as I always said, the terroir is the key, is the main point. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing if you want to grow great grapes and make great wines. You can find great terroir everywhere in the world. We are very lucky in Bordeaux because we can have more than a small spot of a good terroir. I'm very lucky. I have maybe 2/3 of my estate which have a very high level terroir. So on a deep gravelly soil we have, of course, it's much better for Cabernet Sauvignon, which is for us the king of the grape. It represents almost 2/3 of the grape variety. I have historically 1/3 of Merlot and few % of Petit Verdot. And we have a collection of the 6 grape variety on the same soil at the chateau, which is extremely interesting because when you arrive close to the harvest, you can taste and pick the grape and taste them at the same time on the same soil and subsoil with the same weather conditions. So you taste the grapes for the grapes. And that's the reason why I can tell you that Carmenère is not interesting at all. Malbec is not good at all because the size of the berry is too big. And if the size of the berry is big, it means the wine is diluted. So Cahors works extremely well in some terroir on the right bank and also, of course, in Cahors and in Argentina, as you know.
Well, even the Cahors, at least when I started this career 35 years ago, I used to call it Cahorable because it really wasn't.
But now you have some very nice
more elegant wines for sure.
They produce beautiful wine nowadays. But
you're in a pretty unique position because, and I'm interested to know about Suntory, the Japanese whiskey manufacturers, that they're primary in beer as well.
Alors, they started with wine in 1899. Sorry.
Really?
Yes, and the whiskey business started only in 1923 when they created the first Yamazaki distillery.
Wow, that's so interesting. So they were in wine before they were in.
They started to import and made Akadama wine. It was a kind of a fortified wine. And it was the first business.
That's so interesting.
The beer arrived much later in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it was 62 or 63 for the beer. And soft drink nowadays also. They own Jim Beam 10 years ago to grow a little bit and to have more.
So what was the motivation for Lagrange? I mean,
the son of the founder of Suntory, Shinjiro Tori, was the founder, and Keizo Saji, his son, was the president of Suntory, and he was a big fan of Bordeaux, especially left bank wine, and I would say Saint-Julien was one of his favorite appellation. And at that time, early 80s, all was in ruin almost in Bordeaux. It was so difficult to sell the wine in the 70s. So I wouldn't say that everything was on sale, but you can find plenty chateaus on sale. And they choose Chateau Lagrange because they know that the quality of the terroir is the main point. And maybe you know or you don't know, but in Bordeaux, it's not the land which is classified, is the chateau, which is not really fair finally, because if the chateau were classified third in 1855, but they bought some another plots from non-classified growth or from lower level of type of soil, as soon as they buy, they are integrated in the classified growth, which is not really fair.
No.
And Lagrange, the vineyard, is in one single block around the chateau, 118 hectares, unchanged for almost 400 years.
That's fascinating.
They know that the plots they have were the same when it was classified third.
Yes.
And it was a strong point for Keizo Saji when he decided to buy Lagrange.
So that's a great point.
That was the main point at the beginning.
So Monsieur Napoleon III, the great nephew or the nephew of the famed general, right?
Yes, I think so. Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, and
Napoleon Bonaparte.
1855, Chamber of Commerce or just an exposition in Paris.
Yeah.
He asked, at that time, mostly negociants, right? I mean, the chateau didn't bottle their own things.
Yes, it was much more based on the price, the notoriety of the chateau. Yes.
And here we are. Fast forward. It's the first time I've heard this stated this way. Where, the chateau was rated through the fifth growth for the listeners, the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth growth, not the land. And here we are. That many years later, we tout the idea that we have the best land.
There are some chateaus, very famous grove that in 1855, it was very tiny with 10 or 12 hectares. Yeah. And now there are more than 100.
Oh.
So
something's changed, I think.
Something changed, exactly.
Let's go back to the 70s. We talked about a little bit yesterday, and I think part of what this show is about is to educate the listeners on the business of wine as much as the romanticism of wine. I have this very romantic view of wine. In fact, I was called out on that same subject the other day in a conversation with Pauline Vicard of the R&E Global Group, which is out to talk to the consumer about wine and help wineries educate themselves. And I have this extremely romantic view of wine where there's what if we took profitability out of it? What if we just made the best we could make because of what wine does to your soul when you drink it, when you have the proper glass, when you really taste something that's special? And it's kind of like you're in that position. And so with Suntory, not really, they want to make money, but
it's a very long-term view. That's not the first goal when they started. They would like to, they were really wine lover, but they paid the chateau, they bought it for $10 million, which was a huge amount of money at that time. But they immediately invested $30 million and asking to my predecessor, please make the best one as you can. And they lost money for 14 years. They just starting to gain the first franc in 1997. So almost every year we could gain some money, but just to let you know, which is very interesting, is that the break-even on Lagrange, on average, it's around 31 hectoliters per hectare. And over the last few years, because of the drought and the global warming, the yield start to decrease drastically, not dramatically, but drastically. And you have a much less juice and most of the smallest size of berries ever in the field. And we had in 2020 only 26 hectoliters per hectare. So I knew that already I will lost money. And I asked them when I did the blend, would you like me to change the percentage of Grand Vin and second wine? Because we usually produce much more second wine. And you understand easily that if I produce much more first wine, I will gain much more money and more profit, and the owner will have much more euro. But finally, they said, no, please, Matthew, continue to make the best wine. We don't care at the moment. And you will tell us. 3 months after the picking, we did the blend, and it was 38% of Grand Vin only, close to the average that we are used to do. And I said, okay, I phoned to them and I said, we will lose 1.7 million euro. Are you okay, or you want me to make much more quantity of Grand Vin? He said, is it good? I said, yes, it is. Let's go. Let's go.
Yes, I made it. I like it very much.
Let's do. I say, wow.
How many chateaux in let's just talk about the classified growth, the first through fifth, would have that mentality, do you think?
I know plenty of my friends who are general manager or winemaker. I have did a lot of training period during my studies in plenty of chateaux. I basically have never traveled and I've always worked in Bordeaux. Yeah. I know no chateaus who have such a philosophy. I don't know any chateau who are able to lose money.
So that's crazy because, and I wanted to bring this up and I'm not sure if I can articulate it properly, but in America, there's corporate America. They're, the big corporations, they run their business, you work for them, you have a certain mentality when you work for them. And the hierarchy, the management, all the things that go into it, and profitability is the driving factor. Wine, in my romantic view, shouldn't be that way, but it has to be. In fact, one of the arguments this woman made the other day, Pauline, was wine has always been for the consumer. It's always been made for the consumer.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, well, Jesus turned water to wine. That was just for a wedding. But other than that, it's always been for the consumer, right? So I wonder, so when you brought up Suntory yesterday, I thought, I wonder, and this is not a French corporation, it's Japanese, but you've answered a question there, which is, this is a different corporation. This is not about necessarily the profitability of the product.
No, it's not about the profitability. But of course, we gain money over the last 20 years, almost every year. And even if I lose 1 or 2 years, some cash, they could accept.
They can deal with it.
Maybe if it could be 10 years, during 10 years, they would have me to change a little bit the business model. I don't know.
You'll
but
find out.
So far, they never asked me to think about the profit. They just think me about the quality. Just to tell you, to give you an idea about what is Suntory nowadays. Suntory is $30 billion on turnover. Lagrange is 10-12 million.
Oh, wow.
Profit of Lagrange is 1.5 million on average,
right,
compared to 3.2 billion. So
maybe it is the romanticism of owning a fine Bordeaux house.
I think that they consider that we are a kind of flagship of the company, and it's something unique and precious that you don't have to, you can't cheat. And if you make a bad vintage, even a bad one or two, because you want to increase the quantity to gain more money. The problem is that, as you see yesterday, we had a beautiful wines over the last 2-3 decades. If you have a bad vintage, you will have this bad vintage for years and decades decades. And every time you have to open this bottle, oh la la, what a shame. What a shame.
If it's out of balance when you bottle it, it's out of balance when you age it, right?
Because finally I will spend maybe 30 years, 35 years at Lagrange, and it's only 30 or 35 vintage, which is not so much.
No,
finally.
It's a very interesting career. And for the listeners, I want them to kind of understand. I've brought it up before, but really, if you get, as a winemaker, if you get 40 vintages under your belt, that's a long career.
It's a long career.
But it's not a whole lot of vintages.
Exactly.
Right?
It's only 40.
Yes.
It's only 40.
So interesting. You have to learn a lot
and you
of
have
those
once
40s.
a year. So
year.
You don't have to fail.
So we go back to the 70s, and I've read a lot about this. And was that a combination, do you think, of bad vintages, weather, terroir, and bad marketing, bad romanticism? Because the French are very good, particularly in the Grand, appellations of the country, Bordeaux, Burgundy, Alsace, Loire, the Rhone, in elevating what the romance of French wine is about. We don't really have that in America. We don't. It's not a romantic vision of Napa Valley or the Central Coast. It's good quality wine. But when you think about Bordeaux and Burgundy and these historical regions, you feel like you have. It's
a very long history. I have at the chateau in the cellar a huge paint, and it's a copy because the original paint is located in Omaha a museum in Nebraska in US.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's funny.
In Omaha?
Yeah, in Omaha. And they authorized us to make a copy on this amazing paint, which is a paint made by Jules Breton, which represents the harvest at Chateau Lagrange in 1862. So almost 150 years later. Ago. In Omaha. And the thing I did in 2012, because the vineyard had never changed, and we re-put all the team at the same place, and we replayed the scene, and we had a nice photo. So side by side, it's extremely funny. And I think that's the thing that Bordeaux has is the history.
Yes.
And it gives to the wine and to all of that something unique that you can't find anywhere in the world.
It exemplifies or highlights the idea that wine is about the story and it is about the history, and it does have value when you know the story.
And it takes time if you want to change and to to change the wine and the image, because unfortunately or fortunately, which is good because nobody can copy, when you decide to pull out and when you have to regenerate or restructure the vineyard, you pull out, you wait 3, 4, 5 years before replant, and then you replant. You have to choose to make the right choice on the rootstock and the clones, and then you have to wait at least 10, 12 years more before reaching a quality that you can expect, reaching the high quality level of your plots, and then you will plant for 70 years. So it takes so much time. It's a huge responsibility for me and my team to transfer and to move the vineyard from more cab nowadays, because it's a reality on a deep gravelly soil. Regarding the weather we have more and more cab. Over the last 17 years, I have almost doubled the quantity of cab in my wine.
Wow.
And you know that we never buy grapes from outside. It's just the grapes from our terroir, from our 1 million vines. And that's something very special and unique in Bordeaux, doing such a blend with so many plots, 113 different lots last month.
It's amazing.
To make the 2023.
What do you want? You look, we just established that 40 vintages is not very much, and your career is really, if you're just starting, for instance, after 20 years, testing some plots, testing some rootstock, testing some clones, that it's not going to be your responsibility when those come to fruition, or when they come to a point where we have to decide what to do with them. So what do you want them to say about you in 20 years when you're retired and they go, the great Matthieu Bordes, he came through
I
here.
hope they enjoy the wine. First, we want to make a wine precise, pure. It means with no volatile acidity, with no default, with no Brettanomyces touch. The wine which could be aged in the best way to be the most representative of the terroir and the climate, the weather conditions we had during the vintage. So I hope my people who drink the vintage in 40 or 50 years will enjoy it. And I hope our wine could age so long.
Yes.
And I expect that I will make the right choice, because we are just here for, even it's 40 years, regarding the time, the length of time of an estate, it's nothing.
No.
So I hope making the right choice of plantation, orientation of the row, quality of the rootstock, how we fertilize and we manage the soil and subsoil, because it's the key point.
Yep.
You can have a beautiful vats. We can replace the vats every year if we want. Having stainless steel, oak, concrete, never mind. If you bring to the wine cellar bad grapes, you can be the best winemaker in the world. It doesn't work.
I love that comment. And it kind of goes back to what we were just saying, but there's a lot of concrete eggs being used now, and whatever the benefit it is, and stainless steel. And like, I was in Armenia in 2006, which is now sort of a growing region, but the concrete vat was repaired with tar. There was no technology there. And so it goes back to the question, like, where are we trying to go with all this? And it still is, until we pick that grape, what comes out of the vineyard. In other words, wine really is what it was 6,000 years ago, right? It really is. We have all the technology to do different things or nuances, but really the basic fundamental part of wine is fermenting something from the soil, and the quality of that is the most important. And
it's not a natural process, because if you grow grapes, you press them and you wait, it becomes vinegar in the end.
That's right.
So the goal of us is to transform this fruit in a great wine, and being able to age as long as possible.
So yesterday we tasted some interesting wines, and I brought it up before we started, which is that the Master of Wine program out of London, the famed MW, has now outlawed or taken out of their curriculum the term Old World. Now, I always described Old World to my clients and to friends on the dinner table that, it kind of has two meanings. One was physically the Old World, which would be Bordeaux, Burgundy, Alsace, all those places. It also was a character of wine, which is that earthiness and sort of leather tobacco we talked about yesterday. And so there were sort of parallel things. But then this organization, which is so well known and so important in the academic study of wine, has said, no, we can't use it anymore. But it was obvious to me yesterday when we tasted the 83 versus the 2000s.
96, 2003
that there was
or
a clear.
83. Yes, it was very, very different compared to what we can produce nowadays. And the weather conditions have so huge impact, and the risks we take, because nowadays we have much more knowledge than 40 years ago. We have the facilities, we have the money to invest, and we have the technology as well. And the wines are much, much better. They are a little bit different compared to what we have done before, but the line is almost the same. They are just riper. Tannins are much more important in the wine nowadays compared to 40 years ago, but they are much more well dressed. And you can find some specificities of the 1983 we smell. We have saffron notes, we had tobacco, we had some black cherry or licorice or mint and eucalyptus. And you will have also in the new vintages, but it's much more complex and less one-to-one. It's something much more meats and more delicate, with a quality level of tannins that even in a famous 61 or 47, and they never had that before.
That 80 was 83, right? I think.
Yes, we had 80s.
I mean, the nose of that wine, and I try not to discuss these kinds of things on the radio because you can't understand what I'm expressing. It's sort of hard, but it was so together even after 40 years.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazingly blended, and the nose was just. And we went to dinner 2 nights ago. This was fascinating to me, and this is a gentleman who doesn't drink a lot of wine, doesn't express himself as a wine aficionado or enthusiast. And I took we went to an Italian restaurant, so I took an Italian wine. So I would have taken Lagrange, of course. It was French, but it was a Rosso di Montalcino, actually, from a very famous house. And he says, I just want to smell this. I really don't want to taste it. I just want to experience this nose.
Yeah.
And I thought, how fascinating that a person entering into the wine realm and going to get sucked in, and then he's never going to give it up. But like us, that was such a fascination for him. And that's what I kind of felt about the 83. I just wanted to smell it. It was so interesting. But do you how much of what you're doing is driven by consumerism, by that thought process, by somebody tasting the wine or somebody smelling it and going, oh my gosh, this is Lagrange, or in general in the wine trade, maybe not in the classified gross, we're growing the best we can, but in the general, the wine trade, should it be focused on what consumers want or what is the best we can produce?
For me, it's
a tough one, right?
No. It's very easy for me. It's the best one as we can.
Yeah.
Alors, it's very. Well, I'm sorry, because the thing could be shock to you. I don't care about what the consumer thinks.
No, it's not a shock. I think
I want.
You kind of have the same opinion.
The taste is so different between people. And I know that people enjoy a lot of Pomerol. Some of them prefer Italian wine, some Pauillac or Saint-Julien. So many different tastes. And I accept that. But I try to make the best wine as possible.
Yeah.
And if you make a very good wine, very sincere wine, very close to the terroir and the place you grow the grapes, believe me, you can find some extremely high level of emotion in the wine after 10, 15, 20, 40 years. So some people will be extremely receptive to that. Maybe some people not, and I don't care.
I think I like that, and that's part of the romantic thing that I think about wine is. My father in 1974 was in Napa Valley. California wine had not, the Judgment of Paris hadn't started, none of that had happened. And he stopped at a winery called Sutter Home. There's a young man named Bob Trincaro behind the counter, and he has screwed up his dry rosé. And he created, the fermentation stopped. It was left with low alcohol and high sugar. And he goes, he asked my father, what am I going to do with this? And it became White Zinfandel. It became one of the first sort of shelf item wines in California that people who weren't drinking wine came to the table and go, hey, I kind of like this. And then eventually they go, I don't like this anymore. I want to taste something more sophisticated.
Yes.
So there's almost a palate path, people's palate changes, and we need wines like that to get them to the table. And then eventually we hope that they experience what you did.
And I totally agree, Paul. And the thing I like the most, and it's when you have done that, you get the point, is if people don't taste the wine immediately and smell the wine for 10 minutes. And during 10 minutes, it's so nice, so complex, you don't need to drink the wine.
Yeah.
Of course, you want to drink it.
Yeah, of course.
And you will drink it. But you can spend 10 minutes just on the nose.
Right.
That's usually the best wine. And the wine that you will have in your memory for a while.
That is something special about wine and food, actually, the memory, the experience and the memory of that experience.
And with the food, it gives much higher elevation because it's a kind of synergy. And if you have food and wine, you are also with friends. So it's a part also of the tasting. And you can elevate the level much higher and keep the impression of a great wine become tremendous.
Yeah. You're in Saint-Julien, which I didn't know that Médoc meant between water.
Yes, Médoc signification is mid in the middle. Oc means water in Old French.
Because I was going to Entre-deux-Mers. That's this different part of Bordeaux. So, and Saint-Julien, which is a Bordes Pauillac, has the most classified growth wines of all of them.
It's not the biggest quantity of classified growth, but it's the tiny appellation with 920 hectares, and 11 classified growth covered 85% of the appellation.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's the most homogeneous appellation because there is no appellation in Bordeaux that's 85% of it is covered by classified growth.
Right.
No first growth, no fifth growth in Saint-Julien, only second, third, and fourth.
So if I come to Bordeaux, which I'm coming in May, but I'm talking about for my listeners, the first time they come to Bordeaux, and they go to the left bank, we need to go to Saint-Julien. We need to go to
You
Pauillac.
can't go to left bank and avoid Saint-Julien. It's not possible. Or if you want to see the most of the famous first growth in Pauillac, as you know, Latour, etc., you will cross Saint-Julien because the Médoc is, it's we say a prestil in French. Sorry, and if you want to go to the north, you have to go in the middle first.
Okay,
so you will cross by Saint-Julien for sure.
We had last time we were in Pauillac, we were a little surprised at the town, and I'm guessing because Bordeaux at the time it was a large port and very important part of commerce in France in its earlier days, but now not so much. And so Pauillac itself was not a very energetic town. There wasn't a lot to go on.
No.
But here's all this wealth in wineries that live there, the Lafite and Latour and Pichon Longueville, etc. I thought that was very fascinating. I had on the show May Eliane de Lonquesson, and I talked about it at the beginning. She was alive when the Nazis came in to Pichon, Comtesse de Lolland, and watched them destroy it. What happened during the war? Did the Nazis come into Saint-Julien, and did they do anything to Lagrange? Did they take it over? Are they part of it? Is there any history there?
No, we don't have a lot of data before Suntory came at the chateau.
Really?
Even the blend of the previous vintage before 1983, even in 1983, we don't know exactly the percentage of Merlot, Cab in the blend. No data at the chateau. So I don't know what happened during the Second World War.
Wow.
Sorry, in Saint-Julien, in Lagrange. But the thing that I know is we don't have any vintage during this
That's
period.
really fascinating that they would have just written down everything.
Yeah, we have some 1924, 1925, and then we have a big gap until 1959. And I think that the previous owner also spent sold all the wines, and they didn't care a lot. They didn't care a lot about the history and keeping some bad vintage. So we had almost all of them since the middle of the 60s, early 70s, but before.
It's like, how is that even possible that they wouldn't, it's just their attitude,
so
right?
I heard maybe they had a fire in the middle of 50s, so they lost quite a lot of quantity of wine. But I'm not sure. We don't have any data.
Huh. Well, and kind of the point of that is, it kind of goes back to terroir. And I have this other view, I think mostly agreed upon, particularly since you use the term sincere wine, and I call that honest wine, which is wines that are meant to express where they're from without alteration from the winemaker.
Authentic.
Right, authentic.
Wine. Yeah, authentic.
And that is, the terroir isn't just the soil, the weather, the grapes. I mean, if I'm Comtesse de Lalonde, if I'm Madame May-Éléonore de Langsong, and I've watched the Nazis destroy my parents' chateau, and that story gets passed down, and the value of the chateau, the value of the wine company, all the stories that are brought forward to the winemakers must influence what's in the bottle.
You have, when we mention terroir, basically the terroir is the soil and the subsoil, but we mention very often the terroir with a big T.
Yeah.
It's included the microclimate, the weather conditions, but also people who are working on the estate. And I have some workers, some cellar hand, some people who work in the vineyard. They are managing their own plots, the same plots over the last 35, 40 years.
Wow.
So the knowledge they have, all the technical stuff they do on each vine, it's part of the terroir and the history, and contribute a lot to the grapes we can grow and the wine we can make nowadays, for sure.
Fascinating, because this gentleman here, Monsieur Frédéric Castan, he told this story. He was on an airplane, and he was talking to the young man next to him, and this gentleman did not know that he was a well-known chef, and he asked, "What do you want to do?" And this kid said, "I want to be a chef. I want to have my own TV show. I want to be a famous Food Network guy, And then this is the impetus of this book is, that's not the way it is. It takes so much passion to be a chef. And I think that same passion obviously comes from winemaking. And how do you earn that passion? I mean, you either have it or you learn it because you've been in the vineyard for 30 years and you've pruned that vine, and that's the history of this vine from its youth to its adulthood. That takes passion.
Yes, and I guess it's a little bit of both. And I'm sure that when you like what you do, passion belongs to you, and it's not an effort. And you can spend 20 hours at work, and it's just great. It's a part of my life finally.
But there's a reward.
Most
there.
of my team.
There's reward at the end of the thing, like when you open that bottle.
Yes, the reward is being sure that the wine is the best that we have done. It's funny. At the end of every vintage, after the end of the harvest, with my assistant manager, we are extremely close. We decide almost everything together, and we spend 3 hours a day in the vineyard by tasting grapes, doing all the picking and all the harvest almost for 3 weeks. And every time we spend an hour at the end of the big stuff of the harvest, say, okay, what we missed? Do we miss something?
Wow.
If we have to remake something, in which way we have?
Yeah.
And because there is, as we said, only one vintage a year, and you improve year after year your knowledge, but the thing we know that we don't know everything, but we try to make the less mistake as possible.
But it takes passion to care about that. You could go through this and just say, it is what it is. I'm just going to do it. And I did the fermentation. The numbers make sense.
Wake up at 4 a.m. If it's necessary, we wake up at 4 a.m. We come back late, 2 a.m. in the morning if it's necessary. You never count, and it's
wow.
No, it's easy, it's easy.
No. We're almost on an hour here. Well, I have 53 minutes approximately, but I wanted to ask this question because people have sat in the chair you're sitting in before, and their whole access or introduction or entree into the wine business has been packaging or size of things or cans or low alcohol or no alcohol. And I look at those things, packaging, Tetra Paks, cans, thinner bottles, plastic bottles. I look at non-alcohol, flavored wines. Like I was so disappointed that the biggest selling wine SKU in America last month or December was the pineapple chili. It's not a Prosecco. It's a Moscato out of Italy, which is from Stella Rosa. And I thought, oh my gosh, this can't be good. But the point I'm making is the periphery of the wine business, which is all this stuff. Like a woman was in your chair not that long ago, and she said, I think Chateau Laffitte's going to be in a can one day. And I'm thinking to myself, no, please don't do that. And so all this consumerism around what we call a sincere bottle, an authentic bottle, or an honest wine is sort of clouding that. We have to deal with people that are worried about the can that it's in or the Tetra Pak that it's in or the carbon footprint of the bottle. Now, do you and I'm not sure where I'm going with this, except like, why would I upset something like a bottle of Lagrange because I'm worried about the carbon footprint of the glass and I put the wine in a can and I completely lose the value of that glass of wine? Yeah. Do you deal with that at all? I mean, does that conversation occur amongst the vintners in Bordeaux, those kinds of things?
We won't move to the cans, but the carbon but the carbon footprint is in all our investment and in all our decisions. So yes, we try to decrease as much as possible and to be the more sustainable as possible.
Sustainability.
Sustainability is the same. Is a main point, but without losing the quality, of course, the value,
the real inherent,
yes, so
human value of a glass of wine.
If we can find something to replace the bottle,
the glass,
because the glass, of course, is one of the highest footprint carbon in a wine industry, without losing any quality point, any stuff, we will try. But so far,
that's a tough one.
So far, no.
Well, I had you can listen to the podcast maybe on your way home on the airplane. A gentleman named Gavin Sachs, PhD, Cornell University. We had him on the show. He's a very interesting, very bright man, obviously. And his job at Cornell is to find a food-grade coating, resin or silicone, that will allow a can of wine to actually last 24 months, because they don't today. They only last 6 or 9 months, whereas a can of Coke can last a couple of years because it's a different chemical process inside the can. They can't use that same coating. They have to use something different. His job is to find it. And it's strictly motivation, strictly, purely forget what's in the can. I've got to reduce the carbon footprint of what's going on here. And I think that completely flies in the face of an authentic bottle of wine. I understand, like even what the cork is like 350 years old, right? That we've been using a cork in wine. Maybe there's better alternatives to that. I don't know if screw caps are. I don't know if fake corks are, whatever it is. But if you're politically driving a decision like carbon footprint, maybe it's going to change the product. And I'd hate to see that.
But you have also plenty of a way to reduce the carbon footprint.
Right. I suppose, right?
We travel a lot, and for sure, to come to US, I have no choice without the plane.
Your private jet that you've been flying around, yeah, okay.
But in Europe, I'm traveling much more with the train and as much as possible. Yeah. So we take care a lot about that. In 2010, we reduced the weight of the bottle of Lagrange for 10%.
Which is great.
I think that's a great
move.
So there is some point like that we work on. but without losing the idea of maintaining the highest quality ever. That's the main point.
I think sustainability of all the industries in the world that there is, whether it's farming wheat or building a widget or making a headphone or hand blowing carafes, I think wine manufacturing is probably the most prone to and the most obvious industry that should be sustainable.
Yeah,
I think that's a very important thing. I think it's not politicizing it. It's just like, why wouldn't you want to be?
Yeah.
It's just like, why wouldn't you want to be? And I shouldn't even start this subject now. We only got 3 minutes, but why wouldn't you want your wines or your vineyards to be as pure as possible to make the purest wines? You don't want to add.
And what do you want to give to the next generation who will be in charge of it? Of course.
One of the most poignant things I've ever said to me by a gentleman sitting at your same chair was he said, my children are playing in that vineyard. So I don't want to contaminate it as much as it's happened in the years.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm used to say that. And I'm used to say that also I'm the biggest drinker of Lagrange in the world. So believe me, I want to live longer as possible.
That's actually a really good point.
I asked my team to be the most sustainable, to spray the less as possible, etc., etc.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
So you've been, we'll wrap this up. I wanted to hear about your trip. You were here for a month? Or you on the road for a month?
I spent a month away from the chateau and 3 weeks in US and 1 week in Japan, yes.
And this is mostly things like we did yesterday where we sat around the table and we spoke to sommeliers and buyers of wines.
Yeah, I did also some wine dinners, some tasting with consumer, tasting with the UGC. We went 10 days ago in LA. We had also dinners with the commandery, lunch, staff training.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
all
great.
the what we can help and to transmit the philosophy, giving the opportunity to meet our consumer, but not only, and help the distributors and the retailers also to promote our wine.
I think, and I spent 35 years doing this. We've been on the internet since 1997. I was in the middle of rewriting a very, very robust website for our company before we decided to sell. And I think that wine industry, I think that the consumer is going back to those experiences. You're looking at my Patcher Les Amis de Vin, which was an organization that my father had a chapter in the 70s. And this was wine aficionados, wine enthusiasts, beginners, novices, experienced people. Harry Waugh was, one of the speakers. Michael Broadbent was a speaker. Robin Mondavi spoke at these chapter meetings because wine was experiential in the 70s and 80s. You went to these dinners, and these are the dinners and the conversations that are going to make people that when they see Lagrange on the shelf or they see Lagrange on the menu at the restaurant, they're going to say, I remember this. And I have this contention that internet sales, the conversation is not going to be, hey, I bought this at wine.com for $3. That's not a conversation.
Yeah.
The conversation is, I met Matthew at a dinner.
And we shared
a story.
Exactly.
And that's what it takes. And that's a hard, long road to do.
And it makes a huge, huge difference in the end.
Yes.
A huge difference.
And I appreciate the fact you're here on your last day or your second to last day in your trip.
Appreciate you.
It's such a nice event yesterday. Thank you for sharing your stories and the wines. I learned a lot. I think the term masterclass is a great term for that because it gives you a chance to ask questions and understand what's going on.
And to go deeper.
There.
Yeah.
We wish you a bon voyage.
Merci beaucoup.
And I appreciate that time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Paul.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. Don't forget to subscribe because there's more great interviews on their way. Folks, have a great time out there in the wine world. Cheers.